Singapore, a small island nation with an area of only 728.6 square kilometers, 2024, is considered a small peppercorn because although small, it is powerful. Located at the gateway to trade between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, Singapore possesses the most strategic position in the region. This island nation is just over 137 kilometers from the equator, so it is hot and humid all year round, with heavy rain and temperatures ranging from 25 to 31 degrees Celsius. Thanks to land reclamation projects, Singapore's area has expanded significantly from 581.5 square kilometers in 1965, helping them make the most of every square meter of land for economic and residential development. However, living on a small island also has its downsides. With a population density of more than 8.000 people per square kilometer, the highest in the world, Singapore faces great pressure on resources, especially clean water. Surprisingly, Singapore imports most of its water from Malaysia, which it then treats and recycles to meet the needs of its more than 5.7 million people. Singapore currently has about 5.7 million people, of which only 3.6 million are citizens or permanent residents. What's special is that the birth rate here will only reach 0.97 children per woman in 2023, the lowest in the world. That is, on average, a Singaporean woman will not even give birth to one child. That's why Elon Musk once warned that Singapore is on the verge of extinction. Moreover, Singapore's population is aging very quickly. Currently, 19% of the population is over 65 years old, and this number is expected to reach 25% by 2030. A country with more old people than young people is like a car with a weak engine. Even if you want to accelerate, it will be difficult to overcome this. Singapore encourages people to have children with generous financial support policies, but it seems that the effectiveness is still quite limited. Will they become extinct? It may sound like a science fiction scenario, but given the current numbers, the possibility of Singapore becoming extinct in the future is not impossible. Singapore's birth rate is only 0.97 children per woman, meaning that on average each new generation is only half the size of the previous generation. Just imagine, if this continues, within about 40 to 50 years, the number of children born will be half that of their parents. And after another 3 to 4 generations, Singapore's native population will shrink to only a few dozen % of its current size, equivalent to losing most of its native Singaporeans in just 120 to 150 years. An even bigger problem is that not only are there many elderly people, but they are also living long lives. The average life expectancy in Singapore has now surpassed 84 years, among the highest in the world. This means that healthcare and social security costs will skyrocket, while the number of workers will decrease, putting the economic burden on the younger generation. Currently, Singapore is heavily reliant on immigrant workers to maintain its economy. More than 1 million immigrants are working here, making up a large part of the country's workforce. But relying too much on immigration is not a long-term solution, because when the number of immigrants is too large, the local people may feel inferior and worry about losing Singapore's traditional cultural identity. Limited resources. Singapore is a small country with an area of only about 728 square kilometers, where every square meter of land must be carefully calculated. They cannot open up freely to all immigrants without increasing pressure on housing, transportation, and the environment. If not careful, immigration can be a double-edged sword. It can save the short-term problem, but it can create long-term problems. So what happens if Singapore does not change? Without effective solutions, Singapore could face a series of consequences in the future. Declining population, without immigration. Singapore's native population could drop to just a few 100,000 people within 150 to 200 years. This would mean Singapore would become an aging society, lacking vitality, without young people to work. Singapore's economy would decline, and the country could lose its position as a leading economic hub in the region. If immigrants become the majority, the distinctive identity of native Singaporeans could be diluted or disappear altogether. Singapore is regularly listed among the most expensive cities in the world. An average apartment costs between 400,000 Singapore dollars and 1.2 million Singapore dollars, equivalent to VND 7 to 20 billion. Making many young people only dare to dream of owning their own home. The cost of raising children, education and healthcare is also sky high, making many couples hesitate when thinking about having more children. Therefore, Singapore is increasingly dependent on immigrant workers to maintain its workforce. Currently, more than 1 million foreign workers are working here, mainly in the industrial, service and construction sectors. However, this has created controversy over pressure on infrastructure, social security and cultural identity. Not willing to sit still, Singapore has come up with many creative solutions to face the demographic challenge. They invest heavily in AI technology, robotics and automation to reduce dependence on labor. Projects like Smart Nation have turned Singapore into one of the most high-tech countries in the world. But that's only temporary, because you still have to give birth. Giving birth in Singapore is not just an emotional affair. It's also a financial one. To ease the burden, the government has launched the Baby Bonus Scheme, a generous financial support policy. Each child born not only brings joy but also comes with a cash bonus of up to 11,000 Singapore dollars, over VND 200 million. In particular, the government also contributes to the child's savings account, called matching dollars, up to a maximum of 13,000 Singapore dollars, nearly VND 250 million. It sounds appealing. But giving birth in Singapore is like a long-term investment. The cost of raising children from infancy to adulthood is still a huge number. So, despite the size of the golden carrot, many couples are hesitant, worried that the financial support is just a drop in the bucket. If money isn't enough to convince couples, time can be a leverage. Singapore has expanded its leave policy to encourage families to spend more time with their children. Mothers get 16 weeks of paid maternity leave, while fathers get 2 weeks of paternity leave to share childcare responsibilities. In addition, parents get 6 days of paid annual leave to care for their children. If you're a Singaporean father, you can take pride in being recognized for your important role in the family. But despite the openness of the policy, work pressure in Singapore is so great that many people still have to work overtime, even during their vacations. In Singapore, owning a home is not easy, especially for young couples. The government understands this, so it has given special housing priorities to large families. Newlyweds can buy public housing, HDB flats, at much cheaper prices than the market. In addition, families with 2 or more children can receive subsidies of up to 50,000 Singapore dollars, nearly VND 1 billion, to buy or rent a house. But imagine, even with the discount, the average price of an apartment is still around VND 720 billion. This is like trying to climb a financial mountain, and subsidies are just a small ladder. Therefore, for many young Singaporeans, settling down on housing is still a difficult problem before thinking about having children. Singapore places great emphasis on supporting education and childcare to make parents feel more secure. Children are entitled to tuition subsidies from a young age and can study at public preschools at a much lower cost than private ones. Childcare centers are widely available, helping parents avoid the headache of finding someone to look after their children during working hours. The government also provides financial support to hire a home-based caregiver or send children to daycare facilities. However, The pressure on education in Singapore is notoriously no joke. So families often have to spend more than their budgets to help their children compete in the academic race. In addition to economic measures, Singapore also promotes changing social perceptions. Media campaigns on television and social media often emphasize the value of family and the happiness of having children. These programs not only encourage couples to marry early, but also convey the message that raising children is not a burden, but a joy. They also organize community events specifically for families, such as parent-child days, to create an environment for communication and mutual support. However, changing social thinking is a long journey, and convincing the younger generation, who are hesitant to get married and have children, is even more difficult. Although the government has launched a series of measures, Singapore's birth rate is still sluggish, below 1.0 children/woman. Why? High cost of living, work pressure, and a reluctance to start a family remain the biggest barriers. For many young Singaporeans, having children is not just a financial decision, but also a trade-off in time, freedom, and career prospects. In conclusion, Singapore is an admirable success story. From a poor island to a leading financial and transport hub in the world. However, the country is also facing significant challenges. From a low birth rate, an aging population to environmental pressures. Will their bold solutions be enough to maintain a strong, modern, and sustainable Singapore? The answer may depend on changes in both policy and public awareness.